Hello and welcome to Kernels. My name is Maryann Mori. I'm a district consultant with the State Library of Iowa, and with me today is Kellee Forkenbrock, who is the Public Services Librarian at North Liberty Library here in Iowa. And we are going to be talking today about how to complete a proposal as a presenter at a conference. Before we talk about that, let me just remind you of what Kernels are. Kernels is an ongoing series of short videos from the State Library of Iowa. Each installment is a small pop of professional development that gets right to the core of a library program, service, or library methodology applied in a public library setting. Kernels feature in-practice librarians discussing their work so that other in-practice librarians can learn from their experience. So, Kellee, let's move on with this. We had talked earlier that we don't have any real slides for this presentation, and that might be a little unusual for our viewers who are used to watching some of our kernels, but we decided this is very much more conversational. So we have a set of 8 questions that we're going to toss and kind of take turns answering, mostly Kellee. Both of us have a lot of experience presenting at regional, state, and national conferences, and you can read more about our bios or ask us for those. We're not going to bore you with those details, but we have a lot of experience in presenting at conferences. So we came up with these 8 questions that we think will help our viewers better understand what they can do if they're planning to present at a conference. So, Kellee, the first question I want us to talk about is, why should somebody submit a proposal?
Thank you so much, Maryann, for having me on Kernels today. And I'm also equally thrilled that we aren't doing a slide deck because we want to take the pressure out of doing proposals for
Right.
conferences. And I think a conversation is the best format for that. So why submit a proposal? Well, I think as librarians, our main hallmark and commitment to our patrons is access to information.
Mhm.
Submitting a proposal to speak on your expertise on a subject, whether it's community engagement, programming, circulation, that is also providing access to information to your fellow colleagues, to your
Mhm.
fellow library professionals.
Right.
So I think that's the number one reason to submit a proposal, in my opinion.
Great. Yeah, I've often said it's good for your library.
Hmm.
It brings attention to your library.
Yes.
It's good for your personal resume if you're trying to round out your resume. But the other things to think about is you're doing something really cool at your library. You're doing
Yeah.
something unique at your library, or you're doing the same old thing that everybody else is doing, but you've got a different slant on it. And I think those are reasons why, like you said, Kellee, it's information that will benefit your fellow librarians. So, all of those things, just consider, would this information that I have to share, would this have helped me a few
Yeah.
years ago? And
Yeah.
if the answer to that is yes, or if you ask, why doesn't anybody else talk about this topic? I haven't been able to find any information on this.
Hmm.
Those are good indicators that this is why you should present, because you've got
Yes.
the information.
And libraries, we typically, as Wayne Wiegand has said in the past, we typically have a marketing problem. And
We
there
do.
is no better way, I think, to market your library and all of the cool things your library is doing than submitting a proposal to talk about your library and
Yeah.
share those ideas with your colleagues. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that so many great reasons to submit.
And you pointed out it's helping other librarians. And if you think,
Yes,
oh, nobody wants to hear me, well, I would say complete a proposal and let the people who review those proposals determine if
exactly.
they think you have something to share. So, all
Exactly.
right, our second discussion here is, how do you come up with an idea?
Wow, well, that's a good one. First, you want to think about the conference you're submitting a proposal to. What are some of their hallmarks? One organization that I've done a conference for, their centered idea with libraries is entrepreneurship. So I know right off the bat that entrepreneurship has got to be a central focus of my idea for a proposal. And then once you realize what the conference is looking for and the type of conference that it is, then you can think about, well, what is it that I love most about what I do? If I were to encounter a stranger at a coffee shop or a grocery store and they asked me, what's the one thing you like most about your job? That may be the beginning, the spark of an idea of how you should center your conference proposal. You want to be able to talk about something, not something that, of course, you want to intellectually know what you're talking about, but the passion has to be there. Because when
That's
people go
great.
to conferences, they want a passionate speaker.
Mhm.
They don't want to feel like they are in a college classroom. And,
Right.
and, and again, intellect and data and all of those things are absolutely valuable and vital. But what are you passionate about that you
Right.
do every day?
I often say, what can you talk about for 40 minutes?
Yes, that's a great indication.
Yeah. And if you think you can talk about this for 40 minutes because you know a lot about it,
Mhm.
and as you said, Kellee, that's a great indicator you're passionate about it. You can be excited about it for 40 minutes. That's probably what you might want to consider as a proposal.
Agreed.
Um, and then I kind of mentioned earlier, what are you doing that's different? Maybe, yeah, you're doing a story time. Everybody's doing a story time, but
Right.
you've got a story time that's got this and it's different, and you don't know of other libraries that have that. Or
Mhm.
you go to the county meetings with other librarians and you say, yeah, I'm doing this program, blah blah blah, and they all go, oh wow, tell me more. That's a
Yes.
pretty good indicator that you've got something that other people want. And I like that you said you need to know what the theme or the conference presenters, what they're all about,
Yeah.
because there are conferences, for instance, that pertain to technology.
Mhm.
Well, they don't want to hear that you're doing a traditional story time program with no technology
Mhm.
incorporated into it. You got to realize that you got to fit with either the presenters, their concepts, their purpose for the conference, and
Mhm.
or with the theme for the conference, which a lot of conferences do ask you to tie in with the theme.
Oh, yeah.
So, how do you complete a proposal request form?
Very carefully. I would suggest most conferences will offer you very detailed instructions on how to complete their conference proposals, which it goes without saying, read that. Some other tips that you can follow is if you know someone who has presented at this conference in previous years, talk to them about their experience in filling out the conference proposal. Even better, if you can catch YouTube videos or videos on the conference holder's website of previous sessions, watch those sessions. Watch and see what they're presenting. Watch and see how they tie in the organization holding the conference. Be
Mhm.
very cognizant of what the rhythm of the conference is. So I would say definitely read the instructions. Make sure that treat it just like a job application, or for those grantees out there, like a grant application. Read it very carefully, but also do more research. Reach out to other librarians who may have participated in this conference in the past. And if you can go to the conference website and maybe see some previous year's sessions so that you
Mhm.
can watch them, definitely check those out as well
Yeah.
for
Or
research.
even if you can just see what the titles of those previous sessions
Yes.
were and the descriptions of them, that can be helpful. I'm going to hopefully share my screen here. I'm going to bring up an actual proposal, and I assume you're sharing this.
Yep, I
Um,
can see it.
this is the webinar proposal form for the Public Library Association, which just, I think it was this week or late last week, issued their call for presenters for their conference. And they present a conference every other year. So you're right. You have to read the instructions. That's my number one point, is read the instructions, just like you would with a grant. And so they've got on here the fact they don't pay you. That's often common when you're a presenter. And that they have some specific guidelines and requirements. And I'm not going to click on this link now, but just realize if they have any links to additional information, you need to read those.
Absolutely.
They also include a policy about any vendor participation. I don't think most of our viewers will actually be vendors, but if you are a vendor on the side and you're interested in presenting at a conference, just realize that that's going to be different than if you're a working librarian. So the other thing I would suggest is read, if possible, if you can see the whole application from the get-go, read through the whole thing before you start filling in the blanks.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to ask the conference holder, hey, do you have a PDF of your application that I can review with my team? It
Mhm.
shows that it not only shows your interest in being a conference presenter, but it shows that you're being careful about how you present your content and how you submit that proposal. So don't be afraid
Right.
to reach out to the conference holder as well.
Right. You can see at the beginning, I've been scrolling through this slowly. It asks for all your contact information, name of your library, etc. That's pretty easy to fill out. Then it comes to this part, a little harder. You have to have a title for your program. Catchy is fine, but not if it doesn't describe your program. And too often a catchy title can be misleading because it doesn't convey exactly what you're planning to present about. And you can see here that they're specifically saying we want as few words as possible, and they want you to avoid subtitles for your program. So they don't want any separations with colons or hyphens or anything like that. So I'm going to use an example from the very first conference I ever presented at. It was a technology conference out in California. And so it's technology, right? Keep that in mind. So at the time, I was a youth services librarian, a teen specialist librarian, and I was doing gaming programs. Well, a lot of libraries were starting to do gaming programs then too. My slant was how to run a gaming program when you can't tell the difference between an Xbox and a GameCube. Because I am not a gamer. So that was my slant. Even though a lot of libraries were doing gaming, my slant was, hey, you're not a gamer, you can still do a program. You don't have to be an avid gamer to run a gaming program. So that title was how to run a gaming program. That's what we're talking about. But it was from the advantage of, I don't know anything about gaming. So people knew right away, oh, this is definitely for me.
Yeah. And think about the titles, and also when you're presenting a proposal and preparing the title and the description, think about some of the past conferences you've attended. Think about what caught your eye about those conference sessions, titles, and descriptions.
Right.
Were they short? Were they to the point? Did they include an action item? Did it give takeaways? One thing about descriptions, we always want to make sure we have descriptions as well as learning outcomes. I see those there. That is what if your proposal is selected, that's what the conference holder is going to see first. They want to know, is this title significantly stating what the content is about and what are those learning outcomes? So, think back on your conferences that you've attended and what attracted you to which conference.
Right. You can see here that PLA is actually limiting the amount of words you can include in the description. And I would say, even if it's not limited, I would not go over 250 words. That's just more than enough for your description. Remember, this is probably the blurb they're planning to put in the conference program. So it can't be huge. And it's also, think of it as your movie trailer. This is the introduction to your presentation. What's going to make people want to come and hear your presentation? This is your trailer. And then the learning outcomes, even if an application does not ask for learning outcomes, you should still be thinking about these. What do you want people to benefit from? How do you want them to benefit? And what do you want them to learn from your presentation? And if the application doesn't ask specifically for outcomes, make sure those are pretty clear in your description.
Absolutely. Always make sure that you're making it clear and ask the question to yourself, why am I willing to present this content? Right. Why do I want people to know about this? And that can absolutely fuel your learning outcomes.
And then knowing who your audience is. Am I going to be talking to youth services librarians, to trustees, to directors, to frontline staff? To whom am I speaking, and who do I think will most likely be in attendance at this conference? Now, this example we're using is the Public Library Association meeting, or a conference rather. So obviously, public library people are going to be at this conference. So, if you're an academic librarian and you're partnering with a public library, you would be a great possible presenter. But if you're an academic librarian talking about academic libraries topics, maybe this isn't the conference you want to apply for.
Exactly.
So I'm going to stop sharing that. And I want to bring up another proposal, because this is one that would be a great one for our viewers to start out with. The State Library of Iowa, every year we do what is known as the ILOC conference, and ILOC stands for Iowa Libraries Online Conference. And this is a copy of a forthcoming application, which we will be issuing our call for presenters very shortly. And you can see that this gives a lot of information up front to read before you even get to the page where you're going to start filling it out. So you need to read this. This conference is all online, so you have to think, and that's something to consider too when you're applying. can I make this in an online presentation? How could I do this an in person? How would that be different? Ours is online and we have a theme. So pay attention maybe to the overall concept of what the conference is about. But if there's a theme, you want to, as much as possible, tweak your presentation so it follows that theme. We give you some examples of topics that you might want to consider, but those are only ideas. It doesn't mean you have to fall into one of those, but in general, you should follow the theme. We have a deadline. It's just like you were saying, Kellee, it's similar to grant writing. There are deadlines, and if you miss it, you will not be selected.
Yeah.
Other thing with the ILOC conference is we ask you, and this is all explained in these instructions, to be available the entire day of the conference. And that's just a rule of thumb. When you're getting ready to apply for a conference as a conference speaker, check your calendar and make sure you're available on the dates of the conference.
Yes, and make sure that you're making it a priority when you're about to write out a proposal to read these types of additional details. So very often we apply and we just want to know, what do I need to say? How do I need to say it? But there are a lot of details and a lot of mechanics that go into planning a conference. So don't expect to just present for 40 minutes and be done with it. It is an event, a holistic event, that your involvement may be a little bit more than you were bargaining for. So please be sure of that. And as Maryann said, please check your schedules before applying.
And Kellee, I assume you can see this next page that has
the application.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that our sharing the screen was working properly. So this is what our ILOC proposal form looks like. Again, it's asking for your personal information. Who are you? What library are you with, etc. We ask for a title. We ask for a session description. Now you can see here, we limit our words to no more than 200.
Yes, concise.
Also asking for the names of any additional presenters. And that kind of comes to another question we had here, which was actually question 5, because we've already talked about question 4, which was considering the audience and outcomes. But debating if other people are needed as co-presenters. And Kellee, what's your rule of thumb for determining if you need a co-presenter?
Great question. I have done conferences solo dolo, and I've also done conference sessions with 2 or 3 colleagues. I think the determining factor is how connected to the content are you and your possible co-presenter. If you've worked on, let's say you're doing a conference proposal about budgeting, about the budget, about financials, library operations, that kind of thing. Is your co-presenter someone who's worked on your library's budget? Is this someone that you've met with and connected with on this content personally? If the connection is not there, then the 2 of you will not connect during the conference. You may work very well together behind the scenes, but presenting together means that you have a united idea and a single connection about what this topic is and how it should be presented. And that also means you have an equal level of expertise on the topic. You want to make sure that if you decide to partner with someone, that they are down for the commitment. Again, goes back to checking your calendar. These are conversations you need to have before you even attempt to fill out the application, is to see if your coworker is willing to do it, if they are available, and do they have the same level of passion for the topic as you do. Right.
Going back to the example I gave earlier of my very first conference presentation, which was about gaming, I was running an extremely successful gaming program without being a gamer, without having that knowledge myself. And the reason I was successful is because I had partnered with the library's IT person who was an avid gamer. Yes. So I needed him. I think if you ask yourself, going back to the 40-minute question, can I present on this topic for 40 minutes by myself? Yeah. I could not have gone to a technology conference and talked intelligently about, yes, here's how we do the XYZ connectors for the such and such technology. And if you have this kind of whatever, I didn't know the technology behind it. I could talk about how I got the kids involved, how I got the students excited about it, how I set everything up. but the technology stuff I couldn't have talked about. So I needed my IT guy to help me and be a partner with me in the presentation. And he was very eager to partner and do that. And we had a great presentation.
Yeah,
And that gave me the confidence to apply for other conferences then after that on other topics. So.
yes, and I think it's so wonderful that you were able to recognize that I'm passionate about this topic, but there are some learning gaps
Mhm.
that I have on it. So let me bring in a colleague who can fill in those gaps. So
Right.
if the presenter that you're coming in, if that person can fill in some training gaps or some learning gaps about the topic that you may not have, all the more better. And that takes a level of self-awareness to say, I don't know all these portions of what I would present. Let me bring in a colleague to help me with that.
Mhm. I would also say if you're currently working in partnership with another organization or another colleague to regularly do whatever you're doing at the library, you probably want to mention to them, hey, I'm going to apply for this conference as a presenter. Would you want to present with me
Yep.
as a courtesy? Because you just don't want to step on somebody's toes where you just run with the idea that they've helped you develop and
Yeah,
implement, and you just steal the show with it, so to speak. So that might end up
exactly.
with some hard feelings. So you want to avoid that. One thing I did want to share that I have found helpful personally is assuming you can see the whole application in advance, type your answers on a Word document or a
Mm,
separate location so you can play with it, edit it. You can do the spell check, the
sage
grammar
advice.
check. It's just a little easier to do on some type of a Word document
Hmm.
than in the form for the application. And the last thing you want to do is accidentally click, oh my goodness, I sent it and I didn't
Submit it,
have it
yeah,
right.
and that's helpful advice. Also, for any grant writers out there for your library, I work with two other librarians here on grant writing, and we do that all the time. We get an advanced copy of the application, we pull up a Word document, and we write out our answers, and then we send those answers to one another. Also, do that if you're planning on
Right.
collabing with someone. Send them the answers that you typed out and let them add their expertise, let them add their
Right.
feedback so that you can have the most holistic proposal application that you can submit.
Right. And typing it on I'm just using Word as the example, but
Hmm.
typing it on a Word document enables you to kind of sleep on it for a while, to
Hmm.
come back to it the next day and say, do I still feel the same way or have I come up with something better? Because you all know you go to sleep at night and that great idea, oh, I should have said
Yeah.
this.
Hmm.
You just want to have the time to think a little bit more about it. And then you can share it too with maybe a supervisor,
Yep.
or I can speak on behalf of the district consultants. We'll be happy to look at an application if you think you're going to present at a conference. We'll look at that, maybe give you some feedback or share it with another colleague who's in the same field. Hey, would this interest you as a topic if you were going to this conference? So just type it out first before you actually submit it.
Hmm.
Okay, we talked about considering the audience and the outcomes, debating if you need co-workers, co-presenters. The other thing about co-presenters, Kellee, that I usually have advised people
Hmm.
is think about your total presentation time. 40 minutes is kind of a target because even if you have an hour-long session, there are introductions, there are Q&As, there are
Yep.
technology issues. So if you plan for 40 minutes, you use 40 to 45 minutes, you probably have more than enough time.
Hmm.
But the more panelists, the more presenters you have, the less time that
Oh
is
yeah.
per speaker.
Hmm.
So you don't want to have 6 of you involved in a 40-minute presentation. It's barely enough time for any one person to contribute. So that's the other thing to think about.
I
All
agree.
right. So we are on to step number 6. Now, we talked a little bit about this earlier, and this is how do you actually develop that title when I'm not supposed to do catchy or I'm not supposed to use a semicolon and have a subtitle? How do you develop the title and the description?
Oh, number one, I think we mentioned this too. Look at either the titles and descriptions of conference sessions you've attended in the past, or look at titles and session descriptions of past conferences for the conference you're applying to. I think that's some of the best inspiration, is to think about, how do I get the idea of what the session is about across without sounding
Yeah.
cheesy, without sounding catchy, without having too many words, and without, most importantly, going against the guidelines of the proposal application.
Mhm.
That is absolutely, and that brings me to number 2. Look at what they're saying in the proposal application. Just like the PLA application that we looked at, they were very specific. They said, do not make it catchy. Do not use excessive, don't use any punctuation. So make sure that that's there too. If you want to make it fun, you can work, if you have a couple of ideas for titles, have a little poll, a Google poll, send it out to your coworkers at the library and say, hey, we're applying for this proposal. Here are the titles we're thinking of. Go ahead and vote. And
Mhm.
what the added bonus of that is that you're including your whole library on the proposal application
Yep, that's a
experience
wonderful
in a
idea.
very low stakes way. So they don't have to write the description or take the travel or take the flight, but they can help talk to you about the title. And in any way that you can include your library staff on this venture without having too many people in the kitchen, too many cooks in the kitchen, this is a perfect way to do that.
And if you're from a smaller library and you don't have library staff, I
Mhm.
can pretty much guarantee that your fellow librarians at the other libraries in your county or neighboring
Mhm.
communities would be more than happy to do the same kind of thing.
Yep.
Okay, step number 7. How do you actually submit the proposal? We said to draft it first, sleep on it for a bit, test
Mhm.
it out with some people. How do you actually submit it?
Well, that's why they have deadlines. So that's number one. You want to make sure that you're submitting it before the deadline. But sometimes for those of us who get started on it early, I like to get started on proposals early. And it can be tempting to sit on it, sit on it, sit on it, sit on it until literally
Mm.
11:59 p.m. on the deadline day. At some point, you've already, it's just like a writer with the first, second, third draft of a book. You can only look at it so much
Mhm.
before your eyes get tired of it. So before you submit that proposal, send it to your director, your assistant director, to a fellow librarian, maybe even maybe a librarian friend of yours who doesn't work for your library. Send it to them so that they can read it and get some fresh ideas on it. And after you hear from them, just send it.
Yeah.
I think that you can only spend so much time. I absolutely agree with Maryann. Sleep on the content, but try not to take a vacation with it. We want to make
I
sure
like
we
that.
get it in on time because that is absolutely essential to the conference holder that they see your proposal on time. So,
Right.
get feedback, but don't try to get everyone's feedback. Just some trusted colleagues. Even, this is a great time to include your board, your library board, your library friends group. Find someone from your library friends group. This is a patron. This is someone who's dedicated to your library and they're dedicated to the library being presented in the best light. Those are the folks who can read your proposal content, your proposal application content before you submit it.
Mhm. Yeah, and then you just if you've written it out on a Word document in advance, it's just a matter of cutting and pasting it into the
Yes.
form. Read through it one more time before you click that submit button. And you mentioned something, Kellee. You don't want to wait till the 11:59 mark when it's due at 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
Um, don't wait till the last minute, not even to the last hour, because you might have technology problems. You're going to say,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
I'm going to send it on Monday at 2 o'clock, and the internet is out the whole day, or a storm comes through and the power is
Mm-hmm.
off. You don't want to take that risk. So if you can maybe submit it at least a day before it's due, then you've got some cushion time if anything goes wonky with the technology.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you mentioned talking with your board and supervisor, and we did say this earlier to clear your calendar, make sure you're available on the day of the conference, the time of the conference. But one thing, if you're talking about presenting at, for example, the Public Library Association conference or a conference where it would involve travel,
Mm-hmm.
you do want to get the permission from whoever your supervisor is. That might be your board, it might
Yes.
be your director, to make sure, can I travel? Do we have expenses to cover? Because some libraries
Yeah.
do. They have expenses that would cover your travel fees to get there. And if not, just realize you may have to cover that yourself. Are you
Mhm.
willing to spend the money to
Yeah.
do that? So those are
And
some.
And
operations
that
as
is
well.
so important because sometimes I know I've done it. You get so excited about a proposal that you just go ahead and get it done and submit it. And then you find out at the last minute, the funds may not be there. So
Mhm.
please make sure that it's exciting to apply for conferences. It's exciting to go to conferences, but please make sure you're having the vital conversations that need to be had before you even begin to submit a proposal.
Yes.
And then also include those vital conversations and the people that you have those conversations with on the proposal before you submit it so that they know, okay, here's what we've come up with for the proposal. Please take a look at this. If you could get back to me within 24 hours, that would be great. And give them some time to do that. That's another reason why waiting until the last minute is not a good idea, because you want to
Right.
leave some grace room and a grace period for folks who are invested in this conference proposal to have a chance to look at the final product.
Right. Okay. One thing that what this probably ties in with our last section here, the questions is, what else do we have to share? I would say that before you click that submit button, and maybe even before you start to draft what you're going to present as your proposal, kind of have an idea, think in your head, can I envision this as a presentation? Can I picture what slides might look like or what activities I might do if it's an in-person event? I have found it helpful to create an outline of, okay, for 10 minutes I would talk on this,
Oh
and
yeah.
then for 15 minutes I would talk on this, and then I want to be sure to touch on this topic. And oh, I've got these pictures from whatever I did, that my program, or I've got this document that our library has used that's been successful in doing whatever I'm talking about. So kind of draft a really rough outline, and that way, if you receive the news that you've been accepted, you're not panicking going, oh, now I got to really put it all together.
Yeah.
You've got an outline to go from. Oh, yeah, I was going to use that photo and I was going
Yep.
to talk about this. So
And
that
should you
also helps you know if you've got the content capabilities to present.
Exactly. Yeah. And then that outline comes in handy, you know, 8 to 12 months later, if your proposal is chosen when you go to conference.
Mhm.
So keep that handy. And it's also good to have that outline so that maybe you do see some gaps in information
Mhm.
and maybe you do need an extra colleague or an extra voice
Right.
in your proposal. So yeah, very good tips.
The nice thing about the ILOC conference, which is the Iowa Online Conference, you don't have to travel anywhere. You
Yeah.
just have to
Love
sit at a
those.
computer. You need a mic, a headset, and good internet. So it doesn't cost anything. You don't have to go anywhere. So this would be a really good opportunity if any of our viewers are wanting to start presenting. This is a wonderful conference to consider submitting a proposal to.
And then
Uh,
another tip for online conferences, please treat them with the same dignity that you would an in-person conference, because there are so many virtual conferences, especially in this post-COVID era, or maybe still COVID era, where folks apply, and I've seen them because I've been on some virtual conferences and I've seen people be at these conferences as well. They're sitting at their desk, they got coworkers walking by behind them, they've got a snack, they're sipping from a water bottle. We need to make sure we're treating online conferences like ILOC with the same dignity and professionalism that you would an in-person conference.
that's
From the
good.
application to the execution, we want to make sure of that as well.
Right. Now, if you do like I did back when I started presenting at conferences, I was applying everywhere and I was getting accepted a lot at
Yeah.
everywhere. And sometimes it's hard to juggle all those balls.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I would keep a file of where have I submitted a proposal. I would
Mhm.
mark on my calendar possible such and such conference, cross off those days. So I had them reserved, because sometimes you're applying as long as a year in advance of a
Oh,
conference
yeah.
close to it. So you want to make sure you've got things in good order in case you are accepted.
Mhm.
If you don't get accepted, don't be down.
Yeah.
Think about what you could do differently. Realize that conferences only have so many slots for
Yeah.
presenters, and maybe you had a great idea. Somebody else's was just a little bit more what the conference was looking for. Don't
Mhm.
give up, because your idea might be great at another conference, or maybe you realize, oh, I probably should have described this a little differently. You
Oh,
just
yeah.
learn from each application. And one thing I want to talk about, which is really a little bit beyond what we're talking about here today, Kellee. And that's when you actually do create a presentation. And we're not touching on that today, but one thing I just want to share as a tip that I learned the hard way. I recommend scripting your slides, if not before you
Yes.
present or after, because when I was doing these presentations, I was often finding that I could reuse some of the content I had previously created. But
Mhm.
if I was used this example, and I don't know why, because I don't think I've ever put a frog in a slide. But let's say you had a slide and it had a frog on it,
Mhm.
and you're going, why did I have this frog here? I know it had to have been for a good reason. What was I talking about that I had this here? So if you have some notes
Oh yeah.
uh, or script, or at least notes, that way it jogs your memory if you want to present again. So just a little side tip there. But I
Yeah.
would say be patient, don't be discouraged. Talk with your district consultant, talk with other librarians. We will all be happy to help you if
Yep.
you're thinking of submitting a proposal for the first time to any library conference. But of course, we're hoping you're going to present for the ILOC conference.
Yes. And if you don't get into a conference, as Maryann said, not only don't take it personally, because there are literally hundreds, depending on the size of the conference and the reach of it, there are hundreds of people submitting
Hmm.
applications. Use it as don't let it deter you from going to the conference if you're able to. Because if it was a conference that was so important to you that you felt the need to present at it, then there's obviously information to be gained from the conference, even if you aren't a part of it as a presenter. Be a part of it as an attendee. Still attend the conference. Get a greater feel for what they were looking for, and then maybe you can apply that expertise and apply again next year.
And another thing I would say is if you don't get accepted as a conference proposal and you think, wow, I know this is a good idea, I know librarians would benefit, talk with the other librarians in your area. Would you all be interested if I were to present this for you at a meeting?
Mhm.
And that can be a good way to practice too, as a presenter. So lots of
Yes.
things you can do with your great ideas. Kellee, anything to say to wrap us up here?
Nothing except, good luck to all the conference proposal or proposals that you plan to submit for 2024 and beyond. Don't be discouraged. Know that you have a voice. Know that your library has a voice. And there is someone out there that wants to hear your library story. There's
I love
someone
that.
out there that will benefit from your library's expertise. And if one conference won't accept you, keep applying. If you believe in that idea, get other people involved at your library to kind of fine tune it, maybe. So, again, don't give up. Your library has a voice, you have a voice, and there are fellow library professionals out there who want to hear it.
I would agree 100% with that. Thank you so much, Kellee, for being here today, taking the time and your effort to be part of this Kernels.
Thank you for
Just
having me, Maryann.
my pleasure. Just a reminder to our viewers that kernels are posted to the State Library of Iowa's Continuing Education YouTube channel. We have a whole playlist of them there, so check them all out. And they are also cross-posted to Iowa Learns, our learning management system, so Iowa librarians can watch them there for CE credit. Just watch the video and
Mhm.
complete the evaluation. And here's a reminder, if you're doing something great at your library, a program, initiative, service, or something else that you think would make a great kernel, we want to hear about it. Reach out to us. We don't have a formal form to use to apply for that. Just contact one of us at the state library and say, would you be interested in this topic as a kernel? That can be a great way too to get your feet wet, so to speak, as a presenter. So
Mhm.
reach out to us. Thanks again, Kellee.
Thank you so much, Maryann.